Hello, wonderful AP Bio students. Welcome to your podcast on life history strategies. Today we're going to talk about how different populations and individuals of those populations survive, what their life history is like. In other words, each species on this planet has a different way of reproducing. It has a different way of being born into this world. It has a different stage at its life in which it becomes sexually mature. And it also experiences different death rates within different stages of its life. So these are just a few different ways that new life can be brought into the world. This is a petri dish of bacteria, and bacteria reproduce asexually, which means they don't need a partner, a member of the same species to swap genetic material with to make a new species. They can reproduce on their own, and they reproduce through a process called binary fission. And we will learn all about that a little later. So this is a type of asexual reproduction. The three of these are sexual reproduction. I'm going to abbreviate that. In sexual reproduction, you require a partner of the same species to make young. And even within sexual reproduction, there's a bunch of different ways that young can be born. In sea urchins, the eggs and the sperm are released individually from the male and females into the ocean, and they actually bind to each other within the ocean and float away. The zygote floats away and settles to make new urchins as some other neighboring rock. So that's an example of sexual reproduction. However, the parents have really nothing to do with bringing up the young. Here's our little friend Nemo and his little egg. And this is another example of sexual reproduction that doesn't require the young to mature within a parent like us mammals. And there's low parental input, right? Once the baby's born, it's kind of on its own. And then we have mammals, which there's a pregnancy. The zygote forms within the mother. And once that pregnancy is, what's the word? Why can't I think of gestation? Once the gestation period has ended, that means the baby can survive on its own outside of the mother. Then the baby is born. However, there's a lot of input from the parent in raising this baby. So we're going to kind of talk about life and how life is lived differently between different species. So one type of population I want to talk about is Kselected. And that's us. We are Kselected individuals. This is actually a plaque that's on a spacecraft that's far, far, far away. In case it runs into some intelligent life, they'll know exactly what humans look like. It's actually a really cool plaque. You should look it up if you get a chance. But we are Kselected. We are a Kselected population. And what that means is that we have a long maturation rate. It takes a long time for us to become mature adults. Some longer than others, right? But humans, it takes us, several years, probably 14, 15 years to become mature adults. We have a longer lifespan. The average lifespan in the USA, I believe, is 81. So we can live a really long time. Pre-reproductive mortality. Let's talk about this. So mortality is basically, if you see the word mortality, kind of think of death rate or just death, right? So if something has a high mortality rate, that means it dies a lot. So pre-reproductive mortality means that if there is a lot of death in an individual or in a population before that individual reaches reproductive maturity. So we have actually a pretty low pre-reproductive mortality, which means that our children have a pretty good chance at surviving to reproductive maturity. Clutch size is just the amount of offspring that will be born at any given time. So like for birds, clutch size is like how many eggs will be laid in a nest, okay? And for dogs, it's how many puppies will be born in a litter. So you can probably guess that we have a pretty low clutch size. Unless you're octomom, then that's pretty high. But that's incredibly uncommon, right? So that was kind of a fluke. Reproduction rates. So this is how often we can reproduce and how many we can reproduce. Our reproduction rates are low. Okay, selected populations have low reproduction rates. Parental or postnatal care. This is care for young after they are born. So this is investment. As humans, we have, if there's a lot of my friends are pregnant and having children right now, and for 9 months they're reading books and they're decorating the nursery, and then when the baby's born, it's the full-time stay-at-home mom, take care of the baby till the baby's at least 1 or 2 to make sure that it has a healthy, awesome upbringing, right? So we definitely have high parental or postnatal care. Postnatal is just after birth, after being born care. And our size of our offspring are pretty big. So if you compare the size of offspring when it's born versus the size when it's a mature reproductive individual, our size is pretty large. So these are what Kselected populations, these are what they all have in common. And we're an example, usually larger mammals are an example. So us, gorillas, elephants, etc., all Kselected populations. Now we're going to look at R-selected populations. And I firmly believe that if zombies were real, they'd be an R-selected population. They have incredibly fast, high maturation rate. Pretty much when they're bit, they turn into a full-blown zombie, right? They have a short lifespan. Okay, I'm actually not sure about zombies on this. Do they live forever? I don't really know. But it seems like in zombie movies that they die a lot. So, and they die really easy. So they have a really short lifespan. This is R-selected populations. Pre-reproductive mortality. So this is the death rate of individuals that have not reached sexual maturity, that can't reproduce. Their pre-reproductive mortality is high. Their clutch size is high, which means their when an R-selected individual has young, it has hundreds, sometimes even thousands. It has very high reproduction rates. It has low parental care. So there's little or no, pretty much no investment in the parental care. So if you are a human and you get bit by a zombie to turn into a zombie, your zombie mommy isn't exactly going to take care of you and make sure that you are able to feed on other humans, right? So low parental care. And the size of offspring compared to the mature adult is really small. That's not really the case with zombies. So we can maybe use the example of an oyster instead. Okay? So that's not zombies, not size of offspring. So sometimes R-selected populations are also called opportunistic. They have the ability to grow really, really fast because they can have a lot of babies all at once, right? However, the survivability of their babies is not as high as a Kselected population. Okay, I would like to talk about kind of a cool thing called simulparity and heteroparity, or iteroparity. This has to do with reproduction cycles. So simulparity, I'm going to use this example of the Pacific salmon, right? And you know about salmon and how there's this huge spawning season where all the salmon will come out of the ocean and go up fresh rivers and lay their eggs and they'll die. And they'll obviously only do this once in their life because once they die, they can't do it again. So this is called semal parity. And semal parity, semel, literally means one. So they have one huge kind of big bang reproductive event in their life. And after that event, they die. And so they produce a lot of offspring. However, the parents, the whole trip is fatal. So the salmon go upstream to lay their eggs, and then they're so worn out and depleted that they die. The opposite, let's change colors here, would be heteroparity. Okay, so heteroparity, hetero means repeat. Okay, so heteroparity would be like mammals. We're capable of having offspring many times in our lives. And for humans, we can actually have offspring every 28 days. So that is the reproductive cycle of a female human. So every 28 days, we have the opportunity to have a child. So though many humans don't choose to get pregnant every 28 days, right? But we have the opportunity to. So that's semal parity and heteroparity. Now I'd like to talk about survivorship curves. Now, we're not talking about these kind of curves, right? But I just put this in here because I thought it was awesome. This is not real. I'm pretty convinced. Who knows? If it is, that would be crazy. I'd love to meet her. So survivorship curves are just another way that we look at the death rate of a population compared to where in the individuals of that population, compared to where in their lifetime that death rate is going to be the highest or the lowest. And there's 3 types of survivorship curves, and they're really cleverly named. There's type 1, there's type 2, and there's type 3. So let's take a look at those. There we go. Okay, so these are survivorship curves. Type 1, that's us. Okay, let me change color. I'm getting sick of green. So type 1, so if we look at this is age and relative units. So this would be considered a young individual, and this would be an old individual. And this is number of survivors in terms of like basically the per capita number of survivors, and it's in a logarithmic scale. So we have 0, 1, 10, 100, and 1,000. So if we look at type 1 humans, we have a high parental investment, right? An incredible amount of postnatal care. So we actually have pretty low death rate, right? When we are young. And it kind of the death rate starts to increase as we get older. However, once we meet a certain age, say 75 to 80, that death rate increases incredibly. And so we have a lot of death towards the end of our life. But during our lifespan, when we're young and when we're adult, we're good, right? We don't have as high of a chance of dying when we're young or middle aged as we do when we're old. Okay, so that's type 1, and that's like us. That's like humans and large mammals. All right, type 2 is our individuals that have a constant death rate across all ages. All right, so you have just as much of a chance of dying when you're middle-aged versus when you're young. Okay, so it's constant. Actually, that's not correct. It doesn't matter how old you are, the death rate is constant. Okay, so this is an example would be obviously birds, also lizards, small mammals all have a type 2 survivorship curve. Type 3 survivorship curve is going to probably sound a lot like an R-selected population. So a type 3 survivorship curve has high death rates along young, right? So the likelihood of survival is pretty low when you're young. And once an individual reaches a certain age, then it stabilizes and you're more likely to live a long life once you've reached a certain age. So plants are a great example. Sometimes plants, the viability of seeds, sometimes it could be one seed in every 1,000 actually makes it into a tree. Another example of this would be sea animals. So like sea urchins would have a type 3 survivorship curve. And typically type 2, those are the type 3 survivorship curve are selected, and those with a type 1 survivorship curve are Kselected. All right, and that concludes our video on life history strategies. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.